Anthony Browne, author of Bear Hunt, Gorilla, Willy the Wimp, 3 times winner of the Kurt Maschler Award, the first Briton to win the Hans Christian Andersen Award, and now the 6th Children's Laureate. Welcome to the London Book Fair podcast.
Thank you.
How's it going, the laureateship? 6 months in, 5 months in?
Yes, it's going well. I'm learning on the job. It's nobody gets trained to be a children's laureate, and we just sort of follow what's gone before and try and make it our own. I'm determined to try and not to pretend to be somebody else. I'm going to do it my way, if you pardon the expression. And the main difficulty is getting the balance right, the balance between children's laureate work and also my own work, because I must work on a book. If I don't, I think I'd go mad.
What are your first memories of drawing? Did you draw as a very small child? Do you remember what you drew?
Yes, I don't remember drawing books so much when I was young. I remember drawing on the back of old rolls of wallpaper. Mostly what I drew were battle scenes. Knights in armour, or cowboys and Indians, or soldiers fighting. And so when you looked at the picture to begin with, it was a terrible scene of carnage. But when you look closely, there were words and there were jokes in the picture. So it's a picture on 2 levels, and in a way I'm still doing that. You
went to Leeds College of Art. Did you know at that stage what you wanted to be, what you wanted to do?
I didn't really know. No, I went for a foundation year, as they call it now, where we experiment with all sorts of different materials and different ways of looking at the world, and I found it difficult, but looking back on it, I found it incredibly useful. But then I left art college not really qualified to do anything, because I really produced work which looked like fine art at the end, kind of imitation Francis Bacon paintings. And a series of drawings on the theme of man is an animal. By that time my father had died horribly and suddenly in front of me, and I went through a very morbid phase of thinking of the body as pieces of meat, in fact. So I was spending a lot of time life drawing and drawing the outsides of the insides of the bodies on the outside, as it were, sort of Francis Bacon influenced pictures. And that didn't really qualify me for much of a job, except I read somewhere that in a career book, something called medical illustration, which sounded fantastic, you know, the insides of people's bodies and drawing, you can get paid for it. But was turned down for the course, but shortly afterwards was approached by one of the people who interviewed me, and I was given a job as a medical illustrator, which obviously bypassed the course.
Then came greetings cards and Gordon Fraser. I think I remember some of the images, certainly remember your name. Presumably at that stage you were beginning to think about your first book or your first children's book.
I still wasn't thinking of children's books. I was still looking for some way of using my drawing and painting talents. And I vaguely knew about cards, and I'd sent some off to Gordon Fraser as one of the few firms that didn't have horrible little verses in the middle. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he bought designs from me in the early days that he wasn't going to publish, just to keep me interested, I suppose. And by that time I'd been introduced to Julie McRae, who became my editor for the next.
Fantastic publisher, who of course younger people coming into business don't know now.
She's still a fantastic. She's still, yes, absolutely. She still helps me with the books I'm working on, even though she's been retired some time. And yes, she's a legend. She taught me so much about picture books and how the words and the pictures relate to each other, about the rhythm of a book.
Is there too much emphasis today on verbal literacy, and does the national curriculum militate against a child being allowed time to daydream and to create and to find their own voice, whatever that voice may be?
I do think there's been, yes, a greater emphasis on ticking boxes and passing tests, and this has made it very difficult for some teachers to include creativity in their lessons. It always depresses me when I hear older children, and of course all adults, virtually all adults, say, I can't draw.
Children these days, of course, are encouraged to grow up very quickly in every sense, and to leave picture books behind and go on to proper books, as it were. Is that much more marked? Has that become much more marked in recent years?
I think and indeed quite a few other illustrators I've talked to have been in the situation more and more often with the book festival, for instance, where we hear parents saying to children, oh, no, you don't want a book like that. Come and get a proper book. You need a proper book. That's, you know, and what they mean by that is a book without words. Without pictures, I beg your pardon. And I think that's a terrible, terrible shame. And I think it's probably also got something to do with the reading standards, which are not being improved as quickly as a lot of people would like.
I mean, you want to put drawing, obviously, at the heart of your laureateship, isn't it? I mean, that's your mission, isn't it?
Drawing and writing, picture books
Yes.
particularly, it's the relationship that fascinates me, the relationship between pictures and words. And the enjoyment of sharing a picture book, which is not like sharing any other kind of book. I know from my time as a parent, when I would read picture books to my children, or at least we'd read picture books together, because quite often they'd be reading the pictures while I was reading the words. That's not like reading a story, reading a bedtime story, which of course I did as well. Reading a bedtime story is kind of a one-way communication, whereas a picture book, it's two-way, with the conversations about what's going on, about how somebody's feeling, or what's going to happen next. It's a very, very different and...
And you use the word reading the pictures there.
Yes.
Which is interesting, of course, because one of the books you've cited as being rather important to you, I think, was John Burgess' Ways of Seeing, in which he talks about the assumptions we have when we look at an image, whether it's about taste or form or beauty or whatever. But he's also simply telling us to look, isn't he?
Absolutely. And showing that even in a photograph, there's meaning, there's history, there's emotion. We tend to just look at, because we've seen things before, as adults that is, and I think this happens with picture books very much. An adult will see a picture of a family sitting on a sofa, and they've seen pictures like that before. Turn the page. It's the children who spot that maybe, in the case of one of my books, the flower on the buttonhole of the man is in the shape of a pig's face, which relates to the story, which relates to how he's feeling, or relates to what's going to happen next. And we just, yes, we don't look. We say we live in a visual age now, but it's an age of moving images. We don't really have time to sit down, or the inclination, not just time, and look and to look at a painting in a gallery, for instance, takes effort. Isn't the right word, but it takes time, and we don't seem to spend that time or think it's worth looking for any length of time. You see people in the gallery walking through, they'll spend more time looking at the caption underneath than they will looking at the picture.
Paradoxically, graphic novels and manga are now becoming much more popular in Britain. I mean, there's been rather a French trend before, and the Americans have embraced them, but they've now really caught on here. What's your view?
I think it's probably a good thing, but I think it's probably a cry for our youth, our real youth. I mean, the idea of they're like picture books for adults, I suppose, and maybe and I understand that they're probably more often read by males than females. I don't know if I'm on dangerous ground when I say that, but I do think that that's one of the problems with boys' lack of interest in books. I think they're dragged away from pictures and words together earlier and earlier, and maybe this is a desperate tugging on, holding on, while they're being dragged away to get back to picture books, to get back to graphic novels.
So, at the end of your laureateship in 2 years' time, what do you hope you might have achieved by then? What do you wish for us?
Well, I'd like to persuade more people of the enjoyment and importance and vitality of picture books particularly. I mean, of course, I want all people to read, all children to read, all adults to read. But I'd like to particularly encourage the visual, really. I do think that that's being marginalised, the idea of picture books. I do think it's not just a coincidence that as children stop drawing or think that they can't draw, they've been dragged away from picture books. I think there may be a connection there. So a love of reading, obviously, but particularly a respect for picture books, something which we are losing in this country, I think.
Anthony Browne, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.